Hello everyone, today we're going to continue our discussion about Globalization, the Essentials by George Ritzer. By the way, I am Mama J. Tumanda and I'll be the first to discuss Chapter 9 Global Environment Flows. And at the end of this lesson, learners must be able to identify differences among nation states, collapse, the leading environmental problems, global responses, summary, and of course, if you have any clarifications, we are going to do our best to answer those questions. So if you're going to ask, why do we need to learn the environment around the globe? What is the connection with this to globalization? Well, according to Stevis 2005, one of the most enduring and important issues in the study of globalization involves its relationship to the environment. Well, of course, we are under the same atmosphere, we share the same sun, and our oceans, the seven seas, are connected. So basically, if the environment is global, well, the problem is too. Global environmental problems affect not only one nation, but the entire globe. So we need to identify these problems and find solutions. But before that, I have a question. What country that comes to your mind when you say the most environmental friendly? Well, way back 2006, there are 149 nations that were ranked in terms of their environmental performance. Now, there are several indicators, including air pollution, sanitation, greenhouse gases, and agricultural policies, so on and so forth. So this is an example of environmental performance index. This is how they rank every countries in terms of their environmental responses. And going back, the 2006 results, we have first Switzerland, second Sweden, and third Norway. Then Finland, Austria, France, Latvia, Costa Rica, Colombia, and New Zealand. US rank 39. So, na-mention ba yung answer nyo dito sa 2006 result? If not, okay lang naman kasi noon pa yon. Ito yung latest, 2020. First, we have Denmark, second, Luxembourg, and third, Switzerland. Still in the running place pa rin sa Switzerland. Now, speaking of Switzerland, why Switzerland was at the top during 2006 environmental ranking? So, balik tayo sa 2006. First, well, gumamit lang naman sila ng hydroelectric power system. So, ito yung isa sa mga hydroelectric power plants nila where they harness energy from the motion of the water. So, kagaya ng Maria Cristina Falls natin dito sa Iligan City. So, balik tayo. Next is extensive train system that tends to reduce the use of cars and trucks. So, see for yourself. Ayan o, ganyan katindi ang train nila doon with the scenic views and walang kaganong, walang masyadong cars and trucks. So, huyo si carbon dioxide. And then, the fact that they are surrounded with trees and mountains, I am not surprised why they're always at the top when it comes to environmental performance. Next, like I've mentioned before, US ranked 39 as they perform poorly on greenhouse gas emission. So how come? Well, US alone contributes 25% of all the world's emission. So napupunta ito lahat sa commercial, agriculture, lalo-lalo na sa transportation, electricity, and industry. So marami-rami din sa industry kasi maraming business doon. Now continuing on, we also have China and India. They rank lower than the US and were among the worst 25 nations on such emissions. They also use industrial powers. Kaya medyo left behind din sila sa pagiging environmental friendly. So if you're also curious about the ranking of the Philippines, well, here is the latest. As you can see, nandiyan ang air pollution, carbon dioxide, agriculture, water, sanitation, and other indicators. And then we ended up into rank 82. So, medyo way beyond of being environmental friendly. Therefore, I conclude that there is really a difference between nations and states when it comes to environment performance. Now, let's proceed to collapse. So, anong pag-uusapan natin dito sa collapse? Well, we are going to talk about a popular book written by Jared Diamond, which talks about societal collapse or how societies choose to fail or succeed. Now, there are factors in collapse or failure that has been mentioned in Globalization, the Essential. First, we have the amount and type of damage that people inflict on their environment. So, what's the meaning of this? Well, it means that damage will depend on what people do and the degree of fragility or resilience of the environment. Now, perfect example of this resilience is Australia's biodiversity. So, kung may isip nyo yung malaking wildfire ng Australia, and then later on, mga few weeks lang or few months, it's gradually recovering itself. So, ganun ang resilience of the environment. Now, another factors in collapse is the different societies respond to environmental problems. For example, we have these two historical places. 100 years ago, both places were lush and green, but now, between the two, only New Guinea maintained its beauty, while the Easter Island, as you can see, it collapsed due to rapid deforestation during the time of Moai construction. When you say Moai, I'm talking about these big heads or statues. So, siguro, yung mga tao before, dito sa Easter Island, hindi aware about the consequence about deforestation. Hindi naagapan, kaya ito, nauwi sila sa extinction. Hindi nakasurvive yung Easter Island. On the other hand, New Guinea, up till now, malabong pa rin yung forest nila, masagana ang ecosystem, pati na rin yung mga tao. So, kahit papano, nakasurvive yung New Guinea kaysa Easter Island. So, therefore, I conclude that this what we call collapse can and will happen again, even a seemingly blessed nation, unless we can recognize the warning signs and choose to act responsibly. However, with the optimistic side of globalization, we can identify and reduce the problem as soon as possible to help our societies avoid collapse. Kumbaga, sa pamamagitan din ng globalisasyon, ay nakikita natin ang kapalpakan ng iba at ng epekto nito. Ngunit sa ibang banda, ay nakukuha rin nating makapaghanda at makagawa ng makabagong solusyon upang matulungan sila at ang ating komunidad na hindi tuluyang lumala o bumagsak. So, that was collapse. Next, we are going to talk further about those warning signs that has already been flowing around the world, yet most people tend to ignore. Ladies and gentlemen, the leading environmental problems. Here we have Diamond's list of today's leading global environmental problems. First, we have destruction of natural habits, decline of fish, decline in fresh water, toxic chemicals, greenhouse gases and global warming, population growth, and the global flow of dangerous debris. So first, we are going to talk about destruction of natural habits. So as you can see, ayan, merong sirang kagubatan. So have you witnessed an actual scene of natural habitat destruction in your place or somewhere? Now, if you don't know what is the destruction of the natural habitats, well, Diamond has a definition. He said that the destruction or conversion into human habitats of natural habitats such as the forest, wetlands, coral reefs, and the ocean bottom. Now let's go deeper with this destruction of natural habitats. First, we have the forest. Deforestation was a major factor in the collapse of the past societies, according to Diamond. If you remember Easter Island, ito yung definition nila. Deforestation was their major factor or the cause of their collapse. Next, okay, in the present time naman, the most notable deforestation in the world is the Amazon rainforest. The reason is to create farms, areas for livestock, and of course, the human settlements. Now, one researcher said that Amazon impending death will be on 2064. He said that's the year of Amazon rainforest will be completely wiped out. However, if forests will be protected, it will protect us as well, such as protecting our watersheds against erosion, generates much rainfall, yung pag-ulan, sila yung humihigop ng tubig, ulan sa lupa. And another one is providing habitat for most terrestrial plant and, of course, the animal species. Ganito. Ayan. It's a sad picture. Kawawa yung mga deer. Or deer ba yan? Oh, deer. Next, wetlands. So wetlands destruction has increased flood and drought damage, as well as nutrient runoff, water pollution, shoreline erosion, and triggered a decline in wildlife. Kahit paano, meron ding mga species dyan nakatira or nag-breeding sa wetlands. For example, we have, ano bang mga species sa wetlands? Shrimps, crabs, and some other type of fish. So, yung destruction ganito, pollution, basura. Ayan, kadami-dami. Napupulyot yung tubig, yung wetlands, yung lugar, dahil sa kung saan-saan na lang natin tinatapon yung mga waste natin. Another one here is coral reef. So, climate change, coral mining, pollution, blast fishing or yung tinatawag natin dynamite fishing, the digging of canals and access into islands and bays will destroy coral reefs. Yung digging of canals, yung kung naalala nyo yung Boracay, yun, parang ganun na yun. May pipe na malaki, tapos may lumalabas na maruruming tubig patungo sa beach. So, that's one of the reason why it caused damage towards our coral reefs. Now, pag mawala tong coral reefs, pag na-damage ito, marine species will vanish after their only source of food disappears. Of course, wala na silang lugar mag-breed, yung magpaparami sila, at saka wala na ding matitirahan ng mga isda or mga generally marine species. So last one is the ocean bottom. Now, high levels of human-made CO2 or carbon dioxide causes ocean acidification that is rapidly dissolving the seafloor. Now, kung hindi nyo nitatanong, ang seafloor supposed to be neutralize the degree of the ocean, or shall I say the ocean acidity. Now, it turns out, dahil sa kakagawa natin, carbon dioxide emission, too much carbon dioxide emission, hindi lang ozone layer, mga polar bears, mga glaciers ang naapektuhan, pati na rin yung kinalaliman ng ating karagatan. So, that's it. Ganun naapektuhan yung seafloor or the ocean bottom natin. Next, isda. Now, speaking of isda, can you live without eating fish or isda? Mabubuhay ba ang tao kahit walang isda as a source of food or nutrients for living? I'm just asking because one of the environmental problems here, including in Diamond's list, is the decline of fish. Now, many fishing areas like Mediterranean and even some areas in Philippines are in decline or collapse. Now, if you noticed, color blue yung Philippines na word. I actually linked a documentary of Atom Arroyo. He's a well-known journalist. And his documentary talks about the situation of our fishermen and the fish itself in our seas or ocean, in the Philippine seas. Well, actually, ang title ng kanyang documentary is Philippine Seas. So, if you want to know about his documentary, he actually includes the decline of fish in somewhere in Jansan, in Mindanao. Next, okay, without seafood, more people would need to rely on meat for protein. For example, pork, beef, chicken, so on and so forth. However, meats are reared at great cost. So, pinapalaki natin tong mga farm animals, but very expensive. Hindi kagaya ng fish na kukunin lang sa ating mga karagatan and Mother Nature will provide their food and tayo kukuha lamang. So, see the difference between meat and fish. On the other hand, meron naman nagsuggest about aquaculture. However, according to Goldberg, aquaculture is not an adequate replacement for a lost natural fishing areas because it causes a series of ecological and other problems. So, as you can see in this picture, it is obviously that they change the surface of the earth to make an artificial place or an aqua farm or to continue the production of fishes despite of the loss of natural fishing. A study of United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization said that 69% of the world's most important fisheries can be considered either fully exploited or overexploited. By Katja Daroyan, 2007. Another one is the early 21st century study, which stated that 90% decline in large predatory fish, such as swordfish, tuna, and marlin. If the world continues at its current rate of fishing, there will be no fish left by 2050. That's a report by IRIN. Now, we're going to talk about some reasons or causes why there is a decline of fish. First, we have industrial fishing. Here is the picture. Yan, kadami-dami. So this is the major culprit in the decimation of marine life as it become more industrialized and intensive. So marami na malalaking barko or malalaking company no, na nag-fishing. Another one is bottom trawling. So it involves raking the ocean floor for food on a large scale. So according to Kachadorian, it doesn't only contribute to overfishing, but it destroys complex ecosystems in the process. So as you can see in this picture, no, ayan, ang net nila or yung the way sila kumuha ay sagad sa buto or shall I say sagad sa sand, sa seafloor. Doon nakukuha ang kadami-daming isda and even the unwanted fish, which we are going to talk about next. the bycatch. Yan. They catch lots of unwanted fish that kalauna naman ay dinidiscard nila. So one of the worst example of bycatch is in the Gulf of Mexico, where instead we're supposed to be harvesting shrimps, they led to 80% bycatch. Ito, example ito. Turtle na natrap sa kanilang net. That is an example of bycatch. And moreover, this is a video that illustrates how bycatch happened. So ganyan. Mga endangered species like sharks, whales, so on and so forth. Even seals and other marine creatures. Next. So that was decline of fish. Now, I have another question for you again. Do you know where our drinking water comes from? Well, if you don't know, drinking water comes from fresh water or groundwater. However, we are also facing another leading environmental problems, which is the decline in fresh water. Now, according to Conca 2006, water is becoming an increasingly important global issue, or rather, it raises a number of different issues. So, ayan, we have water concerns. First, water pollution. It creates waterborne diseases. Second, flooding. It is a result of global warming. Third, increasing scarcity of water, which lead us to choose water to drink or for crops, which water are we going to use. Fourth, possibility that the flow of water could slow or stop completely. And fifth is the desertification by Lance 1977. It is the result of degradation and deterioration of soil and vegetation. So from the word desert, yung puro sa bahangin, walang katubig-tubig. So those are the examples of water concerns or different issues about water. Now, speaking of water, if you think that wala tayong problema with water kasi, ayun, may nagsusupply sa mga houses natin, may mga faucet, gripo, or mga well, balon. If you think that there is no problem at all when it comes to water, well, come to think of this one. It is a fact. A search or a study from Conca 2007. 1.3 billion people currently lack reliable access to safe drinking water. A staggering 2.6 billion lack adequate sanitation system or yung nagpo-provide ng malinis na tubig, and then putting whatever local water supplies they do have at great risk. So, knowing this kind of fact na meron na palang nangyayaring ganito sa ibang parte ng mundo, then we societies or as an individual must learn how to respond this kind of environmental problems. Diba? Like I've mentioned in the collapse by Jared Diamond, this can be considered as a warning sign for us people na may access sa malinis at maiinom na tubig. Especially that there is a great possibility that half the world's population will be faced with water security problems by the 2030s. So, mahirap na. Also, our freshwater ecosystems, like rivers, lakes, wetlands, are under increasing stress from dams and pollution. So, here are the reasons why we need to protect freshwaters. First, it controls floods. Through natural flood management, such as the rivers, we can able to prevent or reduce the flow of water before it reaches larger rivers. Now, if our rivers are exploited with too much human-made waste, then it will lead to floods. Second is, it filters water supplies. Now, freshwater ecosystem filters some of the excess pollutants out of the water before it reaches the ocean. Third, diluting pollutants. According to study, freshwater can dilute pollutants by the plants and algae that process much of the carbon that enters freshwater ecosystems from land using photosynthesis. Second, if there is too much carbon and nitrogen for plants and algae to use, freshwater systems are more likely to remove it by releasing it into the atmosphere. And last one is, if phosphorus is in excess, freshwater ecosystem can remove it by burying it into the bottom of lakes and reservoirs. So when I say phosphorus, these are the kinds of minerals that can be found in such sediments or in our food. So moving on, other reasons why we need to protect freshwater is it cycles sediments and critical nutrients. Just like I've mentioned a while ago, they cycle phosphorus that can be found in rocks. So generally, freshwaters are one of the carriers, or they transport minerals across the globe. And last one is, it provides rich storehouses of biodiversity. So just the fact that over 140,000 described species, including 55% of all fishes, rely on freshwater habitats for their survival. Next, have you heard about virtual water? Well, some of you might think that virtual water is what we see on our screens, but no. According to Tony Allen, who made the concept of virtual water trade, virtual water is the water embodied in the production of food and fiber and non-food commodities, including energy. Now, for example, Japan wants to buy a massive supply of crops from US. Now, first thing that US needs to do is to ensure that there is a source of water and able to make the crops survive. Hindi naman pwedeng idilig ang tubig alat dahil isa itong saline water which contains too much salt na ikaka-dehydrate ng mga halaman. Now, if you realize the loophole of this virtual water, you may think that Japanese crops consumers is an example of people who are using water from elsewhere in the world. Diba? Which is tinatawag nating virtual water. Hindi man sila kumukuha ng tubig na nandyan mismo sa kanilang teritoryo, but they are using others' water by buying crops or anything that needs the source of water. In other words, they contribute to mining of aquifers and emptying of rivers in North America. Now, sa mga hindi nakakaalam, aquifers are permeable rocks na kapag sinala nila may tubig na lalabas dito. On the other hand, North America are well known when it comes to their 60% of groundwater or freshwater sources. To be honest, it was my first time to hear the meaning of this virtual water, and I expect the same with you guys too. I hope this knowledge can make a difference regarding with our global problems. Now, speaking of global problems, we have global climate change. This is not new to us, right? We already know that some parts are getting wetter and some become more drier. Now, there are predictions of a Dust Bowl-like situation in the American Southwest and the resulting possibility of mass migration. Now, when it comes to Dust Bowl-like, it means an area of land where vegetation has been lost and soil reduced to dust and eroded. So, hindi na fertile yung land nila for production of crops and sandy na rin ito. Most commonly kasi sa Mexico, may nangyayaring sandstorm and mainit daw. Kaya, may mga nagmamigrate or what we call climate refugees. Ito yung mga taong lumilipat sa ibang lugar sa kadahilanan ng klima or panahon. Hindi kagaya ng Mexico, masyadong mainit at hindi sila nakakapag-produce ng crops. That is why they managed to migrate. Now, moving on with the effects of global climate change towards the decline of freshwater is the problem with melting glaciers. Now, glaciers are a reliable source of water as they melt during dry season. However, when the time comes that glaciers will shrink, water supply will diminish. And when that time comes, there is possible war over water. Now, countries around the world are already trading threats over common or disputed water supplies. For example, here we have this picture. This is Georgia, Florida, and Alabama battling over these two major river basins that cross their borders. So again, there is a possible war. There might be. You will likely see more barriers erected by territories interested in retaining their water supplies or the flow or preventing the flow of neighboring territories. On the other hand, ito na. Here in the Philippines, we have much access with bottled water. Now, if you realize, ang nakikita natin palagi sa mga commercial nila ay magaganda, di ba? Malamang, sino namang negosyante ang sisirain ng kanyang produkto? Di ba? We all see the said benefits, yet we are so blinded with those paradox lies with it. For example, first, it produces a huge amount of trash. Now, 1 million plastic bottles are purchased across the world every minute of the day. Imagine how many bottles we already consumed in our entire life without noticing na saan napupunta yung mga plastic bottles after nating gumamit. Now, come to think of this. Each day, people in the US throw away more than 60 million plastic water bottles. Amerika na naman. Now, Continuing on, most of which end up in landfills or as litter in American streets, parks, and waterways. Americans throw away 35 billion empty water bottles a year. Like it has been mentioned, it produces huge amount of trash. Next, it requires excessive amounts of fuel for transport distant places, so by air, land, or water. Every use of fuel, mga ships, airplanes, such things, it emits carbon dioxide, which affects our atmosphere even more. Now, most of the people aren't aware or maybe aware but tend to neglect these things. Ang sa isip lang ng mga tao kasi ay bumili at uminom. Tapos, yung mga business naman produce ng produce and get much profits out of Mother Nature. Both sellers and consumers are blind with these effects. Ayon nga kay Executive Director of the Rainforest Action Network, bottled water is a business that is fundamentally, inherently, and inalterably unconscionable. No side deals to protect forest or combat global warming can offset that reality. By Dutch, 2007. Now, moving on, we can see here some products that is familiar to us. Diba? Nakikita natin sa bahay, sa school, sa CR, mga ganon, sa mga public CR, and so on and so forth. Now, the question here is, are you using eco-friendly products? Tayo mismo. Kasi according to Diamond, many toxic chemicals are being released into air, soil, ocean, lakes, and rivers. Now, here are the list of causes. We have insecticides para sa mga insekto, pesticides para sa mga pest, and herbicides para sa mga unwanted plants. Next is mercury and other metals, then followed by fire retardant chemicals, refrigerator coolants, detergents, and other components of plastics. Now, all of this have a variety of immediate and more usually long-term negative effects on humans and other forms of life. These things are under by the classification of POP, or persistent organic pollutants, which have 4 characteristics. First, highly toxic. These chemicals are human-made and highly toxic. Second, persistent or continuous. Third, remaining in the environment for years before breaking down. And lastly, travel great distances by wind and water. And since our water and wind are connected, obviously connected, then it can easily become a global problem. Example, we have this polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs. It is an industrial chemical, for example, coolants, which also under by POPs. Ang PCBs ay isa sa mga sumisira ng ozone layer kung kaya't nakakapasok ang UV rays. And this UV rays inhibits the growth processes of almost all green plants, which might lead to loss of plant species and reduce the global food supply. And sa pagkakalam ko din, yung UV rays ay nakakadulot din ng masabang epekto sa balat ng tao. Diba? Nagkakaroon ng rashes, and the worst is skin cancer. Diba? If you know about it. Well, next, what you are seeing right now is the tip of the iceberg falling into the water. Bakit? Ano nangyari? Anong kadahilanan nito? Shall we blame him? Kilala niyo ba siya? Sa Ice Age? Well, shall we blame him? I don't think so. If there's something to blame then, that is greenhouse gases made by humans, which leads to global warming. Now, ang fino-focus ngayon sa mga tao ay ang carbon dioxide na nagkakos ng global warming. Now, global warming is an aspect of climate change, referring to the long-term rise of the planet's temperatures. It is caused by increase of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, mainly from human activities such as burning fossil fuels and farming. So alam na natin ang definisyon kung bakit lumalamla ang tag-init, lalong-lalo na sa mga nakatira sa drier parts ng mundo at sa atin na nasa tropical areas. So this has been studied and proven with evidence by science. However, few scientists presume that global warming and climate changes are now occurring not because of human actions, but simply part of natural cycle. So, this what we call extreme heat, yung nararanasan natin ngayon, is expected to be over soon, as they believe that it will come back to normal. They said that during 2007 to 2008, Arctic and Antarctica will refreeze. Indeed, there were signs of some refreezing of the Arctic sea ice. However, they were disappointed that the new ice is quite thin compared to those ice melted in the last few decades. Now, speaking of melting ice, it also unlocks new discoveries. For example, in Greenland, there are islands that have been revealed for the first time as a result of the melting of surrounding icebergs. And tracts of land are being uncovered that were previously thought to be sea. Yung inakala nilang dagat ay isa palang terrestrial island or land. Moving on, we also have two major effects of global warming. First is rising seas. Now, according to Struck 2007, the big factor with rising seas is the rapidity of melting huge ice sheets that cover Greenland, the Arctic, and Antarctica. Greenland alone will make the global sea level rise 23 feet, another 17-foot rise if Antarctica will also melt. So, sino kaya maaapektuhan dito? Well, according to Rudolph, he stated that areas around the world near, at, or below sea level are likely to be swamped much sooner than the previously forecast. However, ayon naman sa Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they estimated that way back in 2007 that there was a 50-50% probability or not sure that by the end of 21st century temperatures would increase by between 1.8 and 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And same with the sea level. As a result, they think that it would only rise by between 7.8 inches and 2 feet. Unlike sa sinabi ni Rudolph na 23 and 17 feet. Although, indeed, temperature consistently rise up to 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit per decades. On the other hand, the consensus among other scientists said that they are unable to predict sea levels. Moreover, they are content to simply measure the exact moment of rising of the seas, which might reduce our time for preventing or act responsibly before it creates such impact. So last but not the least, global warming and health. As we are dealing with global warming, it tends to affect our health too. It already happened way back 2003 in Europe, where people suffered almost 500 years and results 30,000 deaths from heat-related illnesses. It most likely happened among the very young, sick, poor, and those who lack the ability to move away from superheated areas. Fortunately, in our modern time, we can able to mitigate heat stress, such as having electric fans or air condition. Although many people have no access or cannot afford it, also it demands on energy sources, aside from the people of the north who lives in a freezing temperature. Other than that, we are also dealing with other global warming concerns. First, more severe storms will lead to more deaths. Example, increased flooding. Second, extreme variation in weather. Example, drought or shortage of water. Third, food production may not increase dahil sa soil erosion and water salination from irrigation or yung pagkakahalo ng tubig alat sa mga irrigation natin for farmers. Next, deaths from ozone pollution that could rise 5% by 2050. So maapektuhan dito yung may lung or heart problems. Next, pollen production could increase. So maapektuhan dito ang mga may asthma and other allergies. Next, waterborne diseases will increase with higher temperatures and more torrential rains. Example na dyan ay ang cholera. Next, foodborne infection will increase with hotter weather. Example, salmonella. It's kind of bacteria that may cause diarrhea. Next is diseases caused by animals and insects may increase. For example, malaria and dengue borne by mosquitoes. Now, speaking of diseases, there is an exposure to malaria and it is expected to increase by 25% in Africa by 2100s. However, they mitigate the problem such as controlling the mosquito population with pesticides. However, it may cause other hazards according to Carson. Moving on, the use of bed nets or mosquitero in Bisaya, kulambo in Tagalog. And lastly, they also used better medical care to stop this kind of diseases like malaria. So last but not the least, ito na yung last na topic natin. Pasintabi po sa kumakain. I'm about to show some pictures that might disturb you. Now, this is other diseases caused by global warming din. First, we have yellow fever. Ayan, click natin. So, as you can see, nagkukulay yellow yung mata niya. Maybe that's why they called yellow fever. It is carried by mosquitoes. Next, schistosomiasis by snails. Click natin. Ayan. Other symptoms of this is paglaki ng tiyan. Next, leishmaniasis by sandflies. So, yan. Yung skin nila medyo nade-deform na, no? Nabubulok. It's rotten. And lastly, we have, actually this is not the last. There are other diseases na umusbong dahil lang sa problema natin sa global warming. So, isa dito ang Lyme disease or ticks. So, ito ang example niya. So, kung nakikita kung may mga aso kayo or mga pusa ba dyan, yung makikita nyo mga kuto nila, lumalabas sila tuwing tag-init. Yes, I already experienced that with my dogs, na every pinapalabas ko sila, tapos tag-init pa. Pag uwi nila, marami silang mga kuto, tapos, yun pala, pag naapektuhan ka doon, it will cause you Lyme disease. So, careful lang tayo. So, by the way, that's an example by Brown 2007. So, yan, dito muna ako magtatapos sa greenhouse gases and global warming. By the way, may dalawang topic pa sa leading environmental problems, which are the population growth and the global flow of dangerous debris, na ipagpapatuloy ng isang reporter natin sa Chapter 9. Stay tuned, magbabalik pa, char lang. Yun lang po. This has been Nelma J. Itumanda, and thank you for watching.
In the mirror, I'll let you how to do. I got the superstar glow, so ooh.